Well, like so many of you, I watched Joker 2 and was thoroughly disappointed. One can help but wonder how did a sequel to a $1 billion earner in one of the most awaited movies of the year and the follow-up to one of the most critically acclaimed titles of the last decade bombed so hard at the box office? Well, that's what we're trying to find out in this episode. I'm Pedro, and here at Vinyl N Celluloid, I take pride in being solution-driven, so besides reviewing the movie, I'll try to answer the question, how to fix Joker Folie À Deux.
My smile is my makeup I wear since my breakup with you. Baby, take a good look at you'll see my smile inside of just look closer.
A brief disclaimer before I continue this episode. Since I'll be covering several aspects of the movie, just a little spoilers ahead notification. So if you haven't seen Joker 2, catch the movie and then come back and watch this episode. So the question on everybody's mind is how and why did Joker Folie À Deux fail? Well, the answer has several components, and I think the first one is how Warner Brothers, the studio behind the production, overestimated how much people liked the first movie. And hey, I gave it a 5-star review back in 2019, so I guess I'm part of the problem.
We all make mistakes, Mr. President.
Not anymore.
Yes, it's a fact that 2019's Joker was well received by both critics and audiences in general. The reasons why we liked it? Well, we were all fed up with the excess number of superhero titles that were formulaic and uninspiring. Also, we never had a quality, let alone decent villain-driven movie. Case in point, the least said about 2016's Suicide Squad, the better. The 2019 movie was ambitious. Part of the charm of the Joker is the mystique around its origins, which are always left ambiguous. To actually develop a movie that tries to establish a backstory for the iconic villain is no doubt a risky move, but director Todd Phillips pulled it off. But in the middle of all the praise, the accolades, including a victory at the Venice Film Festival, there was also a lot of backlash on how the movie portrayed mental illness. Also, deciding to make a sequel ignores one of the unwritten rules about the character. Virtually all of the live-action portrayals of the Clown Prince of Crime belong in a one-and-done category. Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, and Jared Leto all played the Joker once. Whether it was because of a scrapped sequel, in the case of Jack Nicholson who was supposed to star in the fifth Joel Schumacher Batman, an untimely and unfortunate death, which scrapped any additional performance by Heath Ledger in Christopher Nolan's trilogy, or even poor reception, in the case of Jared Leto, all three actors play the iconic role of the Crown Prince of Crime a single time. For better or worse, this one-and-done approach cemented the actors' performances and their unique takes on one of the most iconic villains of all time. Beyond this, and moving into a more technical aspect, we all ignored two patterns. The first, director Todd Phillips can only release an above-average movie every 10 years. Case in point, The Hangover in 2009 and 2019's Joker. The second, everyone ignored the fact that Todd Phillips can't direct sequels.
That's terrible.
Not terrible. What you talking about? It's f***ing genius.
But are these aspects reason enough to justify the movie's demise? Well, to answer that, we need to look at the plot. The story of Joker Folie À Deux picks virtually immediately where the original left off. We find Arthur Fleck, played by Joaquin Phoenix, in prison in Arkham State Hospital, and about to face trial for his prior crimes. The events depicted in Joker, which thrust him into the public eye and transformed him into a symbol of rebellion. In the hospital, Arthur meets Harleen Lee Quinzel, played by Lady Gaga, a fellow patient who develops a fascination with his Joker persona, and they bond over shared fantasies. Arthur's complicated emotions about this relationship intensify as he grapples with his identity and society's perception of him. Lee becomes enthralled with the Joker's anarchic allure and shares how the two have a common background, having grown up in the same neighborhood at the hands of abusive parental figures. As their relationship blossoms, Arthur's feelings about his own identity become increasingly conflicted. After attending a movie screening in prison where Lee starts a fire, the duo is caught trying to escape, resulting in Arthur being placed in solitary confinement. As the trial date approaches, Arthur is forced to confront both his past actions and how others view him, especially as he navigates the unfolding courtroom drama. His defense initially hinges on the idea that Joker is a separate personality. Like almost any other aspect brought up in the two movies, Fleck remains conflicted towards the angle presented by his lawyer, Marianne Stewart, played by Catherine Keener. With the pressures mounting both inside and outside the court, the final verdict on Arthur Fleck, his life, his actions, and the public's reaction, a vast audience who yearns for the mythic Joker, will be revealed. Now, this doesn't sound like a bad premise.
Marty!
I can't lose.
Marty, up here!
But sadly, it didn't make for a good movie. Mind you that the movie has some vocal supporters, including Japanese video game designer Hideo Kojima, American auteur Quentin Tarantino, and Blumhouse CEO Jason Blum. Blum's support is ironic since the man was ultimately responsible for greenlighting two entries that killed successful franchises that had been established for decades.
Evil dies tonight!
Evil dies tonight!
My opinion, it's because I'm not a member of the damn patriarchy.
Some of the most common criticisms, pointed by viewers and well myself, is that the movie is long, repetitive, dull, devoid of any originality. And all of these are valid and right for the most part. Some other audience members were surprised the title was a musical, and I use the term musical with air quotes. This in itself is quite a surprising aspect considering all the advertising material focused on the musical side of the movie. But there's something quite intriguing that I've read since the movie's release. There are many theories and beliefs that point out that director Todd Phillips was displeased with how the movie was received and how the Joker was praised by the so-called incels and sigmas. I don't really fully subscribe to that. Sure, there may be hints of truth, but I haven't found a full statement supporting this theory. If you did, please share it with me. I mean, if that were the case, the movie wouldn't strive to be remotely good. If we look back at the points I raised around Todd Phillips' career, can we really believe that the director who got fired from Borat because of troubles in production is really capable of pushing the envelope when it comes to exploring the criminal mind?
I don't think so.
It may be true that he despises audiences in a Frank Zappa kind of way, but he lacks the talent and bravado to pull it off in the same way the iconic musician did. To quote 1988 VP nominee Lloyd Benson, "You, sir, are no Frank Zappa." So let's dig a bit deeper into how the original Joker was made using modern-day logic and lingo.
Let's put it in my terms.
We find Todd Phillips, a wannabe film bro who thinks American Psycho is the zenith of indie filmmaking. He becomes associated with the project, a title that was supposed to be helmed by none other than Martin Scorsese. He digs up both less-known and well-known titles the director made and uses them as inspiration. He then tried to replicate the winning formula with an added meta-commentary, and the result is a failed sequel. Now, the movie has actually some good points. As I mentioned, the title is ambitious, not only because of the nature of the topic, but also because the director decided to make it a musical. Again, the movie isn't bad because it tries to be a musical. It is just a bad musical title with very poor musical selection. The title tries to explore a notion that has been largely embraced by film fans across different franchises. One of the most notable examples of this notion is associated with the James Bond franchise, one that states that much like James Bond and his alias 007, the Joker is a concept, an entity that represents something that transcends the individual. And when it comes to include these aspects in the sequel, I say so far so good. But the problem is, as I mentioned and you guessed, the director can't execute them. Add to that a lame, almost irrelevant performance by Lady Gaga, the existing and ongoing backlash against actor Joaquin Phoenix, who in my opinion is an overrated method acting mumbler who happened to deliver good performances thanks to the directors he associated with, namely Paul Thomas Anderson and Spike Jonze, the zero novelty or reasons for this movie to exist, and presto, we have a flop. So how can we actually improve Joker Folie À Deux? Well, let's take the following building blocks and try to make a movie based on the following premises. A. The movie is a dark musical. B. The movie continues the story of Arthur Fleck, aka Joker. C. The movie is inspired by new Hollywood movies of the 1970s and 1980s. And D. Todd Phillips wants to give audiences the middle finger. Let's also keep in mind that there's no need for a sequel. So the way I see it, Joker Folie À Deux is a movie about a man who's subjected to forgiveness by society in the shape of a mental asylum that resorts to music as a therapy exercise. Arthur Fleck is no longer portrayed as Rupert Pupkin or Travis Bickle, but rather Howard Beale, the lead character in Network. His actions and words have turned him into a messiah, a characterization that includes a fair amount of meta-commentary. Much like in the 1976 classic, Joker's trial is a highly televised media circus that inspires a movement. Enter Harlan Quinzel. The movie would feature a flawed, abusive, toxic relationship between a doctor, psychologist Harlan Quinzel, who seemingly succumbs to the patient's mania. Lady Gaga's Quinzel behaves mostly like Diana Christensen, in the sense that she takes advantage of a mentally unstable figure to advance her agenda. In this case, she finds in Arthur the perfect example to gain notoriety and elevate her profile. Arthur Fleck continues to exhibit examples of incel-like behavior, such as blaming society for all his troubles and continuing to develop an evil psyche that harbors a sense of revenge. During the treatments with highly experimental drugs and methods, Fleck begins to hallucinate a relationship with Dr. Quinzel. These hallucinations result in a set of musical sequences that are heavily inspired by the artificiality of Francis Ford Coppola's One from the Heart. I think music-wise, we could go for a more eclectic list. On top of my mind, I'm thinking of I Used to Love Her by Guns N' Roses, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood by Santa Esmeralda, Wicked Game by Chris Isaak. Let's also ignore the two-in-the-nose nature of these titles and the potential anachronisms. This last point could easily be solved by finding a movie that takes place between 1983 and 1990, a decent enough time span to justify the presence of these musical choices. With the highly televised trial, Fleck's popularity soars and he develops a sense of self-worth, and Quinzel, now adopting the moniker Harley Quinn, begins to fall for Arthur. At this point, a significant part of the audience that loved the original would be fully engaged. There is hope for the incel. There's a notion that their behaviors and attitudes are justified, but most importantly, there's a belief that they can win. Then that's when you bring the whole thing down and accomplish what Phillips apparently proposed to achieve. A double whammy that annoys everyone in the audience.
Emotional damage!
We find out that Quinzel was just using the Joker and never really fell for him, destroying any illusion that he could ever inspire, let alone convert people. The televised trials inspired more and violent copycats that resulted in declining viewerships of his trial as the focus of the news shifts. What's more, there seems to be a new unnamed figure unleashing chaos in Gotham on a scale Fleck couldn't even imagine. That's when the Crown Prince of Crime nickname pops up. With Gotham's police department mobilizing their forces against this new threat and the number of inmates increasing, Fleck is largely forgotten and moved to a minimum security facility. The character now embodies the following sentiments: irrelevance, impotence, acting essentially as a sorry, sad clown. Whilst in the minimum security facility, he attempts to craft a plan to recover the positive feelings he once had about himself. A riot starts, and he's met with his demise as he's stabbed by mistake. Kravitz' role as a newsreel plays out, highlighting the chaos that has taken over Gotham and the invisible threat that unleashed it. I'm thinking as a final song, we could get something along the lines of Goodbye to Love by the Carpenters. Looking at the narrative arc in this version of Joker Folie À Deux, we find a first act that continues to feed the illusion that the Joker is the anti-hero people should look up to, with Todd Phillips essentially entertaining people's perception and general goodwill towards the original title. The second act instills in the audience the belief that incels can positively win. He develops what he never had before, a sense of worth and self-esteem, with his popularity rising to new heights. That's when we enter Act 3, where a major setback impacts Arthur Fleck. He tries to plot something bigger to regain relevance, only to be reduced to a pathetic figure in meeting his demise. This would disappoint fans who are pro-Joker and identify with the character, but the notion of the lingering menace and the concept of evil under Joker, the idea, would leave the remaining audience members who are anti-Joker and side with Todd Phillips with a pessimistic feeling that evil has triumphed. And that's how you troll an audience. I believe that this version, even as just a skeleton of an idea, is far better than the title. Because at the end of the day, Joker Folie À Deux is a movie that succumbed under the pressure of a vengeful director. A film where the visual spectacle often overshadows any meaningful death, resulting in a hollow experience. What could have been an intriguing exploration of madness instead becomes an overindulgent mess, lacking the focus or intensity of the 2019 movie.